Well, it happened. Tucker and Nick sit down and have an interview for about 2 hours. And I just want to talk about it really quickly. First of all, I want to say thank you to Tucker for actually platforming Nick. He's been having this generational run, so he's been on other shows, but this is a different level. And I just want to talk about some things throughout the thing. I thought it was very polite. They had some issues, when they said they attacked each other. They both called each other feds. But it was all from, a very polite type of thing. And what it reminded me of is Tucker's a little bit younger than me. We're both Generation X. And Nick is about the same age as my non-disabled son, Ryan, who is on the liberal side kind of thing. It was just interesting watching how they talk to each other. I think a lot of that was Tucker trying to mentor Nick, I guess, out of the darkness into the mainstream. But it's interesting how me and my son talks about is we're out on the other side. I'm more like the Nick character, and he's more like Tucker, because when we talk about the Jews, I say that there is something that's systemic about their race, how tribalistic that they are, stuff like that. And Tucker on this show kept saying we can't judge people on individual things. We just basically, each individual person should be just judged on that. Now, they didn't go deep enough, and it's rare that Tucker goes deep enough. When he goes in there and he's listening to people, he allows them the floor, and you can just see his reactions when Nick says something like that, like, what, that happened? He's not a journalist that when they're sitting down with somebody that he actually goes back and look at everything. He might look at a couple clips, but he doesn't understand everything where Nick has gone through. He allows the subject, in this case, Nick Fuentes, to talk about his life, and then he responds to it. And if he sees something he almost, like I said, he tries to mentor him there. And a couple times throughout his debate, I don't even think it was a debate, interview, he kept bringing up as Christians, we should be this, and we should look at people not as a group of people, but as each individual person, because that's how God looks at us. But unfortunately, Tucker doesn't know the entire scriptures and what it talks about the sex of the Jewish people that are basically satanic. And I think he knows this, but he didn't want to bring it up. So they had a couple issues. Nick talked about his time at Boston University. He talks about just about the no-fly list. Didn't really talk about the insurrection bullshit, January 6th, what happened after that. Didn't talk about really how he was denied off all platforms. They talk about it very easily. But the real first, I guess, contention things when we talk about Joe Kent. And it was interesting because, again, Tucker is almost taking this civic nationalistic type of look at things, like Ben Shapiro would talk about. I don't care about the browning of the United States as long as they have the same values that we have, that type of thing. Meritocracy. We don't care about the color of their skin, and trying to go against them for that. And he said, look, I talked to Joe Kent. This is Nick, saying we were friends. And he said, I will never disavow you, and he did. And then you expect a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old to sit there and just take it. And this is the difference between somebody that Cutler's age and Nick's age. Nick became famous because being a troll for a lot of things and calling out hypocrisy on the right. And this is how he got famous at first. The biggest interesting thing that I have is that when all this stuff happened to Nick, he almost got killed and all that stuff, that, Tucker says, well, that kind of shit happened to me. I get death threats and people I've known forever been talking things about me. But the difference between Tucker is that he already had millions and millions of dollars to fall back on. That was his big bed. He could fall back in it, and he could leave. When he left Fox, he had millions of dollars in the bank already. And Nick, again, was doing well for a young man, but he lost all that, and then he was ostracized by the right wing. Now, Nick has always been the guy that said from day one, and I've watched him since he went RSBN. I've watched him because I know talent when I saw it. And I was already woken up to the Jewish question anyway at that point. But it was nice to see a young person talking about it, and how a guy that was probably going to be their next great star over there, he was in the works of going to Daily Wire, and he was going to do all that stuff. But his heart and his mind said, why they want me to go to Israel? And he just started asking questions. So all this stuff happened to him. He was blacklisted. He got everything taken away from him. But all along, he wanted to be what Tucker is now. He wanted to be in the mainstream, talking about his ideas. And back then, it was more mainstream, libertarian, not so identitarian or anything like that. But he was waking up to what's happened in the country, in the West, that we were being breeded out of existence because, first of all, we're not reproducing as white people, but they're bringing people in that will reproduce and eventually beat us out population-wise. And it's happened in Europe, and these are things we see happening. He probably saw that back then, and it's also happening here. Now, the fact is we have a huge country, but Tucker knows this. He knows the demographic changes is happening in this country. But he says we can't look at people like that. And this is the big issue that they have between the two. And he was firm, and he said, look, this country should be white, and we should be advocating for white people. Now, he didn't say advocating, but that's what he was talking about. And then again, it's like every time we get to this stuff like that, Tucker would come back and say, we can't look at it that way. We're both Christians, per se. You're a Catholic. I'm whatever he is. He's like a Lutheran, I think. We have to look at them as individuals, right? And God looks at us as individuals and what we do in life and all that. But his word also says that there are people that are not worthy of looking at that way. Of course, it's not all as Jewish people, and Nick never says that. And several times in that conversation, he tells Tucker, he's like, no, I didn't say all Jewish people. He said, but there's something about their Jewishness that they're this way. And he eloquently described all of that. He said how they're very tribalistic, and they're part of the diaspora, and they go around, and that they still want to have their homeland, which is Israel, and they will do everything that they want to do to make sure that that's okay. And they sometimes forsake the country that they're in for the benefit of Israel. And that is why our country and other countries around the world saying you can't say stuff like that. And it didn't go to that level, and it should have. We should have went down and said, that's free speech, and you should never say that. There's no way the government should come in and say, hey, you can't say have dual loyalties if you're for Israel and you're in the Congress here in the United States. Tucker should be against anybody in Congress that have dual loyalties, one that has dual citizenships to countries like that, or part of AIPAC or anything like that, a foreign lobby. And they went down that road, but not a lot. And it was very surface level. And I think what Tucker was trying to do, I'm not saying to take the edges off of Nick, because I think Nick has already said this, that he's trying to do this. He continually tells his people, his groypers, I don't consider myself a groyper. I think I'm too old for that. What I am is I see talent, and I see where the right wing can go, and I'm not with them 100 times. I can't. The fact that he didn't vote, that's on him. That he tried to stop Trump from winning, I can't really like that either. But at the same time, I understand his viewpoint, and I will always be a guy that'll follow his heart and his mind when he comes to certain things. And he was right about Trump. Okay, everybody knows he was right. We know who runs this country, and Tucker knows who runs his country. But I did like where they got to the point like this, and he's like, and Tucker's like, well, why do you get upset because people say something like that? I said, well, that's okay. They should all come back now and admit that I was right. And Trump and Nick looked at him saying that stuff. And he really didn't have a response to that, because Nick has pushed the right wing to his viewpoint in almost every area, with the one thing where it talks a little bit too much about the Jews, a little bit too much about race. But everything that Nick talked about 5-6 years ago is right. And they all believe it now. Even Charlie Kirk, all these people have. And the reason why he's on this, because he is the future of the right wing, whatever you believe that to be or not. And, Tucker has to have him on there, because he knows that he's going to be somebody that might actually, I don't know if he'll ever run for office, because I think they would kill him if that happens. But anyway, people are going to say he's selling out. He's going on these podcasts. He's trying to, but no, this is what Nick has always been. He always wanted to be there, right? But he wanted to be able to have his own viewpoint and have it being challenged. The problem is there are very few people that can sit across him and beat him. And Tucker's not that type of dude. He's not going to go in there trying to destroy somebody. Candace tried to do that. She looked like a fool doing that, putting clips on there saying, you said this about women, you said this about black people, you said this about, interracial marriage, and just trying to get this type of response from Nick. And meanwhile, that wasn't what it was supposed to be about. And Nick is still a 25-year-old at that point, 26-year-old. They're going to be, how they respond to it's going to be different than somebody's in their 40s or 50s or 60s. So, as when I talked about me and my son when we had these conversations, it reminded me of that. But again, I think I'd be more on the Nick side, and Nick would be, my son would be more like on Tucker's, because Ryan looks at things in a more general area, right? When we talk about the Holocaust, and I said, well, we know it's not 6 million, it's probably 2 million, and probably 300,000. And he's like, but it's still bad, right? He said he shouldn't do that, right? Of course, right? But the aftermath of all that and the impact it had on the West, vilifying a group of people because of this. And now we do it now, maybe we look at Jewishness as something that could be wrong, right? But everything that Mike, they all said, they were like 90%, maybe 95% agreed, because at the end, like Tucker said, I agree with most all of that, or I believe more of that. And then Nick would say the same thing back to him, because these people over the years almost agreed with each other, but Nick was always further out, not at the fringes, but where the reality was. And he was pulling everybody in the right wing to his viewpoint. Again, not so much with the Jewish, not so much with the race reality type of stuff. And so I was sitting there, and I didn't know this was going to happen. We've heard things about it, but it's like, oh, it's not going to be Tucker. It's going to be somebody else. But then right before I even saw this is probably 25 minutes before I found out that because I saw it come on, and I was like, oh my God, he's watching Nick. And I'm like, wrestling was going to go on, so I'm watching that. And then I was watching wrestling. I was watching my iPad, and my wife listened to that for 40 minutes. And I think she realized that I'm not as crazy as she thinks I is. As you look at Nick doesn't make you, because Nick is so articulate and stuff. But before that, I saw a video from Steven Crowder, and he started talking about what he has to have the tenets to be in the right wing now. And these national ones, which I think most right-wing people would agree with, and then the state level ones. And he talks about, and I'm like, is he talking about Nick? Does he know about this interview before it actually happens? So he's going to put that out there and say we're going to have a litmus test for who's in the right wing. Or is it about Candace? And I'm like, because he had shit about Candace. But Candace is not right-wing. She claims to be America first, and I think she is from a biblical standpoint. And of course, she is a woman, and she has her own opinions about stuff, but you have to take it from that side. You just have to. And even, which is funny, in the Nick and Tucker conversation, he talked about women and that men have to be the leaders in the house. And at the end, of course, Tucker agreed with all of that, but he's saying that women can be this way. And I think he might have been talking about his interview with Candace and about women in his life and how the Bible looks at that and all that stuff. And people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that men should be the leaders in the house, that type of thing. And that women have kind of have got way too much, I don't even know what it is. They have so much power right now. And they were talking about porn and all that stuff, which I think is a very important thing for young men. It was weird that it went there, but it's relevant because Nick talks to a lot of people. His fans, his supporters are of that same group that has been disaffected by the culture, the society, and the government. And they didn't go deep enough in that. And I think that they had why not go for another hour and just talk about that and just talk about how can we get better? Because Tucker talked about this too. Years ago on Fox, he said that this is not good and how it's not going to be. And even Steven Crowder talks about this, about young men, when he went and talked to the black people in the barbershop. He said about these are disaffected white young men. They're going to do something that probably not be good for the black unity. So everybody's on the same page, kind of. But the question I just want to know, and I'll put it in my comments, and I'll put it on the thing. Do you think that Steven Crowder was saying that Nick should not be allowed in the right wing? Because he did say, and I think in the state area, when he went from the national things, and they said, now if you actively go against the conservative party, then we should kick you out. Nick actively went against Trump being reelected again. He did, not the second time, but the third time he did. Is he saying that means that Nick has to be ostracized again? It ain't going to make any difference because now he's everywhere. and he's bigger than Steven Crowder. Right now, Nick has nearly 500,000 subscribers on Rumble. I think Crowder has 1.88 million, right? Now, remember, he came over with like 4 or 5 million from YouTube into that. And Nick wasn't on YouTube because he was taken off. You know, Crowder for years talked about, we got knocked off. There's no difference. I mean, there's a huge difference between the two of them with shit that's been taken away from them. There's going to be probably the next year or so that Nick will probably get up there where he is. He is going, and he has going through generational run, and now he's pivoted to be more mainstream, but he still says the same shit when you listen to him. He says that we can't continually blame the Jews because that's not what Christians are supposed to do. And which is interesting is that Tucker will say things which exactly what Nick says in his own way before they had these conversations. And the fact is that apparently Tucker doesn't really goes on the internet at all, so he doesn't know about the porn issue and all that stuff. And it's almost like he's asking Nick, like, why is it like this? It's like, and I know that Nick is like, you don't know about stuff like this? You're supposed to be a journalist? But again, he doesn't. He doesn't have a TV in his house. He doesn't go to the internet. So this is not unusual for him. He's from my generation. Some of us aren't on the internet. We're just not. Me, I'm kind of am. But it's interesting to see now, is there a fracturing now that Steven doesn't want Nick to be part of the right wing? Well, it's not going to make any difference to Nick or Steven or Tucker because you're 40-year-olds now, and Tucker's closer to 60, my age. He's the future, right? And, you know, when he talked about Joe Kemp, or was it Crean, when they were supposed to be friends, and then they had one of his followers was in her staff, and she got rid of him because she didn't want to be associated with Nick anymore because he said certain things about Jewish people or about I think that was back with the cookie comments. How many cookies can you put, whatever, right? This stupid trolling stuff, laughing. I've seen that comment a million times, laughed at it when I heard it the first time. It's been 80 years. We can talk about stuff like this. They talked about it 30, 40 years ago. It wasn't that big of a deal. But those people have so much power when it comes to media that they get upset. Now, he did talk about the Ben Shapiro thing. And he said he had like 100 followers on Twitter when he said something. And it went to Ben Shapiro, and it got like retweeted, basically saying he called him anti-Semitic right away. And all it did is start the fuel that became what he is now. And we had the old time. The thing is, they will never debate each other. And the other issue is when I'm sitting there watching Steven before I even knew this interview came out, and my wife's next to me, and I'm like, why don't you have Nick on your show and listen to him? Just because you see clips, or because you think he's in a basement somewhere, like he did say to Tucker at first, that's where his show was, in a basement. Well, why wouldn't it be? That's a nice place to put things, and no one's going to come in there and bother you when you're doing it. But so why don't you put him on your show? But because you hate what that Tucker said about Israel, or what Candace says about what might have actually happened to Charlie Cook. You are part of the culture, the cancel culture on the right that tried to get rid of him 10 years ago, 9 years ago. This idea that it's, when we talk about whataboutism, you know, on both sides, there was a cancel culture on the right as well. This idea that it only happens on the left is bullshit. It clearly happened back then. Back then when YouTube was wild west, and we're talking about everything, and then all of a sudden it got shut down, and all the people on the right were chastised, and there were a lot of them, and they weren't as way out there as Nick was. And Nick, just because he knew Spencer and people on the alt-right and white nationalism and stuff like that, that's not what he was. He's a Catholic, a Christian. He believes that the country should be majority white. He had to understand that this country was formed and settled by white people, and that the heritage and historical should be still there and should be saved and cherished. There's nothing wrong with that. And about 5 minutes ago, we all believed that. But it all changed because the left took over and put in identity politics. And he talked about this. He says, you say about we can't have this identity politics on the right, but they have it with the Jewish people. They are so tribalistic that if a white person says, hey, what about my country's being taken away from me? And there should be white people, more white people, and we should get rid of immigration and just have more and more babies, basically. And the same thing that Tucker did say, but he never would go down, well, it has to be all white. And that's not really what Nick says either. He likes black culture. He likes certain things to do. But we have to understand, and we have to inform and tell our kids that this country was created by white people. It absolutely was. We conquered the land. You could say it's stolen. That is just a stupid thing. It's just a stupid, it's not true. We could have died when we went there and left, right? It was conquered land. It was never set up to be a state of anything. These people didn't know how to read or write. They were a primitive type of tribes. They had been there for years, thousands of years. They were still having cannibal shit. They were not enlightened, to say that. And we made the greatest country of all time. But I'm going to stop right there. Tell me what you think about the interview. If you watch it, if you haven't, please go watch it. It's both their channels. If I would do the right thing here, as I would go to Rumble and watch Nick and watch there to give him more views there. Of course, you can watch it on both and make that count go up higher. I think it was at 1.4 this morning for on the Tucker. Again, I don't agree with everything that Nick says. He's foolish a lot of times, but I just will say this: he's always wanted a place at the table. And when I have these conversations with my family and stuff, when they think I'm way out there, or if I talk about white issues, that all we really wanted was just us to be at the table to have this conversation. And that's all Nick really wants. The issue is he's so good at what he does that they don't want him there because they think that he's going to influence a lot of people, and they don't want that. They don't want the white man to basically wake up, because if we do, things could really change drastically. And he'd talk about that if he was president, what he would do. And he said that he basically would get rid of everybody, And if these cities couldn't deal with the immigration issues, the federal guys were trying to bring them out, and the mayor and the governor was saying, no, we're going to stop it. He would say, fuck that. We would arrest them because it's federal law. So he is way out there that most people on the right would go to. Is it the right way to go? Yes. At this point, you have to be strong enough if you're going to enforce federal law when it comes to immigration. But anyway, I'll just leave right there. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching. You guys have a good day.